Hi there. Glad you could join us for this episode of the Weekly Send. The Weekly Send is powered by Foundant Technologies, a technology partner in your nonprofit's mission. Achieve your goals through solutions built for nonprofits and dedicated to your success. And by 1832 Communications, partnering with your nonprofit to help you build more relationships and raise more money. Today, I'm really happy to have with us a very well-known fundraising expert, Cherian Koshi. Cherian, how you doing today?
I'm doing super well. Thanks for having me on today.
A pleasure. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, I spent a long time, 20 plus years in frontline fundraising, and now I work as a consultant, working at Endowment Partners, which is an investment management firm that solely works with nonprofits.
Fantastic. So you are going to get today to learn from Cherian's expertise, his knowledge, and his experience. And there's a lot going on. So we're going to look at an email that came in from UNICEF. It's a fundraising email. And as we always do, we're going to start with the subject line. And you can see here their subject line isn't just your 2x match, which isn't the greatest subject line, but they've added the word pending. Cherian, what do you think from a fundraising perspective about adding that word pending in the subject line of the email?
So personally, I'm not a fan. I did a quick search in my inbox of the word pending in a subject line, and in my Gmail, the things that came up were Old Navy and Bed Bath and Beyond, and they strike me as very transactional. So if you're going for Old Navy order pending, it might work. Ultimately, I hope that UNICEF or anyone using any kind of subject line testing would do some A/B testing to figure out what works and what doesn't. For me, I don't want to have a transactional relationship, particularly with my email audience.
Excellent. Totally agree on that one. Before we get to the body of the email, just quickly, we always go through the email that's associated with this. So it comes from UNICEF USA, and it says email at em.unicefusa.org. It's very generic. Again, I always prefer a person, so it's one-to-one communication with the subscriber. But then if you look at reply to UNICEF USA, boy, that's quite a long email address they got going there. Again, let's try and shorten that up and let's put a name of a person so it's a one-to-one communication. Now, if we look at this email, right at the top, they let you know this is a 2x match to help children reclaim their futures. So in fundraising, specifically, Cherian, do match campaigns work?
They do. The research out there indicates that at a general level, both from the actual research with donors and match components, as well as from a donor psychology component, the pro-social modeling as well as the social proof, it all points to the fact that that matches do work. However, what we've started to find out is that there's actually new research that indicates that it can be even more effective if you do something called a threshold match. So basically the lead donor will match the donation that you make if they reach 75% of the goal, for example. So it does work. This is a smart strategy. It can be even better utilized strategically to optimize gift amounts and participation rates.
Excellent. That's fantastic advice for everybody who's watching. So if we look at this email, there were a couple of things that stood out to me at least. I'm going to scroll down here towards the bottom to look at something very specific. And in their last paragraph, UNICEF writes, the world can be a scary place, but UNICEF works hard to ensure that children across the globe have the care and resources necessary to power through challenges to live full and happy lives. For children experiencing severe acute malnutrition, UNICEF specialists are trained to recognize the telltale signs that indicate intervention is needed and monitor systems that like swelling caused by nutritional edema, diarrhea, and other serious health conditions. Now, the words nutritional edema, I don't understand. And so, A, Cherian, I'm going to ask, do you know what that is? But B, more importantly, about using words in an email that subscribers may not be familiar with.
Yeah, so I used to be an EMT, so I know that nutritional edema means swelling. So what happens is if you don't have the right nutrients, it can cause swelling. And the reality is that when you're talking to a non-medical audience, you really shouldn't be using words that are medical language. They don't know what that means, and it distances them from the problem when you want them to be like, oh my gosh, I totally get what that would be like. So It feels like someone from, programs, or someone from, somewhere else in the organization said, oh, this is what we do, which is a great idea, but it needs to be rewritten for a donor audience.
Okay, so the other thing that stood out to me in this paragraph was that it's written from UNICEF's perspective,
Yeah,
less so about the donor. And so it's very centric to UNICEF. And what you really want is how you, the donor, are helping, how you, the donor, are impacting, as opposed to the opposite way. One other
absolutely.
question I have for you about this specific email, I want to take this right here. An estimated 2.3 million children under the age of 5 are likely to suffer from acute malnutrition this year in Yemen. In Haiti, acute malnutrition rates surged by 61% for children under 5 in just a year. Let's take the example that UNICEF segments its list according to where I live. So if I lived in the United States, for example, and they were sending me this email, would it make sense to tell me about Yemen and Haiti, or just one or the other, and why?
I would say even before that, if you're regardless of whether you're going to segment the list, you don't want to make the problem seem too big or too far away. So having a personal story of someone who's impacted, a mom, a kid, whatever it might be, so that you can get from 2.3 million kids to one kid, that I can feel like I can address that issue. But I do think that when the problem is on the opposite side of the world, it's going to be really hard for them to even contemplate what that means. So I would say, if you're given a choice, if it's an American audience, that you use Haiti, because the likelihood of someone kind of knowing how close that is, and you could include some, it's a 90-minute flight from Miami or something like that, to be able to make it seem more like it's your next door neighbor kind of thing. I think it's really key to make it accessible and understandable, that as opposed to using a lot of numbers that people can't put together in their heads.
Excellent. So that's fundraising advice that goes for every single email fundraising campaign
Absolutely.
that your organization runs. So now we've looked a little bit at the email. Let's look, as we do every week, at the mobile version. And I'm just going to skim a little bit here. The mobile version looks great. In
Yeah.
terms of a large font size, there's lots of white space here. It's easy to read. Um, and this image certainly stands out in the middle. And you've got this CTA, which stands out as well. So it's
Yep.
very easy to quickly find what they want. They've put the two match that it's doubled in bold. So again, that stands out. So you've got
Underlining
the main
different
pieces that
colors.
stand out. Yep. So this mobile version, I think they did a good job. So now they asked for $50 and they sent us to a landing page. Let's look at that landing page. So when we get there, here's what they give you, a kind of like this pop-up, as it were, to give a donation. And the
Yeah.
first thing that stands out is there's no 50 here. They've
There's no
asked me in the email, it's not there.
right.
Is that a problem?
That's bad. That's
Okay.
real bad. Right.
So just for everybody who's watching, I want you to see what happens. They give you a choice. This is good, what they've done here. Give once or monthly. That's a good option. Good way they did it here. Watch what happens when I click on monthly. You'll notice there's a little heart that goes up. It's a nice little touch
Yeah.
that they've
I
added.
like
I
that.
like it. In terms of the online donation form, there are 6 options here for give once and 6 options here for monthly. If you remember a couple of episodes, we had fundraising expert Barbara O'Reilly on, who talked about it, that it's too much. You want to have 3 or 4 at most, and that's it. In terms of the give once, I want to show you something that happens. I'm going to ask Cherian to say whether he likes this or not. If I click 100 as my choice, and then I click donate down here, I get this, as it were, slider, this pop-up. And it asks me to consider becoming one of our valued monthly supporters by converting your $100
Hmm.
one-time contribution into a monthly donation. And they tell me how I can split it out. My question to you, Cherian, is this user-friendly? Is this good for the donor, or is this problematic, the way they've done it with the different sliders and making me consider my one-time and moving it to monthly?
It would be really interesting to see if there's cart abandonment that occurs at this point, to see if the friction's enough that people are like, no, screw this, I'm going to leave. I think the biggest issue for me is that the options don't align to make sense. So you're rather than going for cart size or gift size, what the intention of monthly donors is really around long-term retention rates. So I wouldn't have that middle option. I would highlight the middle option and make it $10 a month rather than $20 a month so that it's just a little bit more than the $100 contribution. I think that would result in more engagement.
Okay. So I'm in agreement also on that, but I'm not a big fan of this. I just think that you're asking me to go through too many slides before I make a decision. I kind of understand why UNICEF does it, but I'm not a fan in terms of the user experience. I think once
Sure.
I've made a decision, give once or monthly, move me to the credit card form so I can fill in my information and get me out the door.
Yeah.
In terms of takeaways for today's episode, we've got a lot from Cherry, and it was just great. But 3 takeaways for everybody. Number 1, don't use the word pending in the subject line. It makes it feel transactional. It makes me just feel like you're standing there with your hand out asking me for money. Number 2, in the body of the email that you're sending in your fundraising campaigns, only use words and phrases that readers will understand. When you confuse them, they bounce, they go. And the third one is, if you ask for a specific dollar amount in the email, make sure that dollar amount appears in the donation form. So it's 1-to-1. Oh, they wanted 50. I'm clicking 50 and move me to credit card form. Charian, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody, for being here for another episode of the Weekly Send, where we help nonprofits boost their email, fundraising, and marketing. We'll see you next time.